Hey everybody, Chris Armiger, Fort Myers Beach Fire Department. Um, so for this module, my case study is the Tri-State Tornado 1925. So I want to be very forward about I don't know anything about tornadoes. I've never experienced one, and I don't have any family or friends who you know have ever dealt with anything like that before. So this topic is very new to me, but I'm very interested in it. And so one of the reasons why is, especially in this tri-state tornado, I think it was probably it was my favorite of the three studies to choose from because similarly in Florida, we deal with hurricanes, and the hurricanes uh, they're tremendous storms in terms of their capacity to do damage, their size, and the amount of geography that they impact. So tornadoes, at least in my experience, are pretty localized. They, from what I can remember in my personal history and the little bit that I've studied specific to tornadoes, is they devastate a town or a county, and they're very quick. Um, they're very impactful, but they just don't last a tremendous amount of time. So when I look at this case study compared to the hurricanes, it's similar in that it affected three states. So I think it was Missouri, Illinois, and then it ended in Indiana. I included a photo at the bottom of my post just for visual aid to kind of see where the path of the tornado, and then a video I found on YouTube. It's a little bit sappy, but there's a lot of factual, like little bullet points in there that kind of walk you through the progression of the impact of the storm in the counties. I think there were 13 counties across the three states that were involved. But to get to the case study, so stage one of the case study is you have this catastrophic tornado roll into town, and it kind of begins there. What's your first step? And the first step that they recommend is to reach out to anybody that you can think of to reach out to that may be in the predictable path of the storm, to give them warning. Because unlike the hurricanes, where we have sometimes a week, 2 weeks to plan for them, because we see them way, with modern technology, we see them way out in the Atlantic coming in, and even on the Pacific side, we can see them, days and days away. We have time to prepare. These tornadoes come out of nowhere. So the case study really talks about communication is the big thing. How do you communicate as quickly as possible? This was back in 1925, so low tech, but not no tech. So they had radio, they had phone. The first town that was involved, or the first county that was involved, was devastated almost, I don't want to say immediately because there was a length of time, but super quickly they lost the capacity to do anything. And one of those things was communicate outside of their county. Um, so as I went through, watched some videos, did some reading online, an interesting thing that I found out was the storm. So there was two things that kind of stood out to me. The first thing was there was they started talking about these cases of people who lived through it that they had interviewed down the road, years later, and they say, "Hey, I didn't recognize it to be a tornado. I didn't." It's it. There's one of the videos they talk about how a farmer, a gentleman who owned a farm, was killed, and that's very unusual. There's people in the community, people in the towns, people spread out who are killed in disasters like this, but it's unusual to have a farm owner because they spend so much time on the farm and they're so close to nature and their surroundings and the environment they live in that they tend to recognize patterns in the weather or things to look for, and they have usually a higher survivability profile than other people. And so the point was is that the storm looked like a storm, like a thunderstorm, like it brought in, a bunch of rain came in, a big heavy storm came in, and then there was this tornado, but the debris inside the tornado and the weather ahead of it kind of masked the tornado. It wasn't visually recognizable as a tornado until it was right on top of them, and as it was coming in, it just looked like a severe thunderstorm. But then the other thing is that stood out was, so the storm, the tornado moved 200, almost 220 miles, but it had a forward moving speed of 60 miles, 62 miles an hour. I think one of the videos says was the average speed. So this thing is ripping across three states in 4 hours, causing catastrophic damage, similar to a hurricane. Really, like a Type 5 hurricane, just tearing things up, literally leveling towns. Um, but the hurricanes, usually when they hit land or when they're right on the shoreline, they kind of slow down, and they're persistent storms, and we get persistent flooding from persistent rain and stuff like that. The wind damage is um, short, is compacted in time, um, similar to the hurricane. But I mean, 4 hours to go across 3 states is just really amazing. So to get back to the case study, as I talk about communication, how when you lose the technology, when you lose power line, and you don't have effective and efficient and radio or means to contact, how, and I don't know the answer to this even after reading this case studies, how can you communicate far enough ahead to give people the best opportunity for survival when you got a storm moving that fast and it's just that devastating? And I guess the answer is you do the best that you can. And that's why I think the big takeaway for me from this is the mitigation part, is you have to be prepared for these storms before they happen, and you have to have measures in place that you can activate quickly. And you really have to focus your energy and your efforts on recovery. One of the takeaways for me was, the storm's damage was like almost $17 million, and then you translate that to today's value, and it was like $2 billion. And you have communities that are devastated. And I mean, just, going beyond like structural, there's no buildings left. There's no homes, there's no buildings, there's nothing. It's just grass. It's just a flat plain of debris. It takes, generations to restore the financial components of that community. I mean, sometimes those counties just don't recover. There may have been a town that just never was and never will be again. So, in all of these classes, they always mention this holistic approach, and just expanding your, just a broader vision of how these storms impact things. And I think the financial impact of storms like this one, this Tri-County tornado, are they're tremendous. They're tremendous. And there has to be a lot of attention given to the financial impact and the financial resiliency of communities nowadays, because we're smarter, we're better, we have more capabilities. Is, if you have a town that's devastated, after, life safety is always number one. After you've restored life safety, public health, public safety, people are watered, fed, and have a place to live, then you got to get people back to work, and you have to rebuild the community literally and figuratively with some sort of financial structure. Or, like I said, generations of families that may have existed there they'll be forced to go somewhere else, and it'll take generations to rebuild a community. So that was the biggest takeaway for me. Watch the video if you're interested. It's real quick. It's like 4 minutes, and take a look at that picture. It'll be helpful. Look forward to reading watching everybody else's posts. And thanks for the time. I'll see you around.